Tom Clark's 6M podcast is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show. Hey, what is up? Welcome to Tom Clark's 6M podcast. I'm your host, Tom Clark, and in this episode I'm joined by co-host Phil Lindsey. From the Windy City comes one of the most talented, outspoken, and controversial talents that the professional wrestling industry has ever seen, a nonconformist and promo genius with a unique style and straight-edge attitude that garnered him a tremendous fan following that led him to the top of the business and beyond. We're talking about CM Punk. CM Punk debuted in 1999 and became one of the hottest independent professional wrestling stars of his era. Punk learned his craft in smaller promotions like IWC and IWA, where he had legendary matches with Chris Hero before joining Ring of Honor in 2002. Punk's work in ROH quickly earned him the reputation of being not just a credible talent between the ropes, but an intriguing storyteller on the mic as well. Punk was regarded by many fans as the best promo in the company, and his feuds with Colt Cabana, as well as Samoa Joe, solidified him as a serious player in the industry. CM Punk joined WWE in September 2005 and was immediately sent to OVW, which was run by Paul Heyman. Heyman took Punk under his wing and began working with the star in an effort to get him to the next level. Heyman brought Punk to the main roster with him upon the relaunch of ECW in 2006, where the star became the focus of WWE's new brand. Punk feuded with John Morrison over the ECW Championship, which he eventually won in 2007. Punk's WWE main roster story truly began to take shape in 2008 when he became Mr. Money in the Bank. This led to a World Championship victory, cementing Punk as a true star in Vince McMahon's company. But although he held the championship on 2 occasions, Punk was often not featured in main events, which led to issues behind the scenes. Punk's WWE career included many high-profile matches against top stars like Jeff Hardy and The Undertaker, and featured a run as the leader of the Straight Edge Society. The SES was Punk's creation and was regarded as the hottest heel stable in the business. Punk's respect level from the fans, as well as his peers, truly began to define him as a talent during this time. Punk's problems with WWE management continue, however, leading him to the infamous pipe bomb promo on June 27, 2011. In that promo, Punk aired his grievances for the whole world to hear, smashing the McMahon family as well as the fans in the process. The pipe bomb became Punk's calling card and elevated him to the top of WWE. His victory for the WWE Championship over John Cena was the highlight of this run, which was dubbed the Summer of Punk. But Punk's issues with WWE behind the scenes spun out of control, leading to his exit in 2014. Punk later told his story on Colt Cabana's podcast, which eventually landed the pair in court thanks to a frivolous lawsuit by WWE. Punk has remained in the public eye since his pro wrestling retirement thanks to his foray into mixed martial arts, as well as comic books and acting. Though fans have continued to speculate on his possible wrestling return, Punk has not wrestled since he left the business behind. CM Punk's legend continues to inspire other wrestlers who came after him. His unique character and no-nonsense approach defined his runs in WWE and opened the doors for talents like Daniel Bryan, Adam Cole, AJ Styles, and Finn Balor. CM Punk remains one of the most respected stars in the industry, and his story will likely never be forgotten. And that's the lowdown on CM Punk. I can't say that CM Punk was on my radar before he got to WWE. I was at the time not really into a lot of what I would call independent promotions. Ring of Honor was still, I guess, what you'd call an independent promotion at that time. Now I think there's something else. But at the time, it was very much still an independent promotion. And there was no Honor Club at the time, so there was no way for me to really watch them besides clips on YouTube, which still wasn't very big at the time yet. It wasn't on locally where I live, so when it did come on, I think it was like Friday nights at 2 or 3 in the morning if I could find the channel. So it wasn't always easily accessible. But nevertheless, I'd heard Punk's name for a long time mentioned, just among friends and stuff like that. And I just kept hearing buzz, and buzz was the right word surrounding this guy. It was like, you got to see this guy work, man. He's different. He looks different. He's not the stereotypical pro wrestler. He's definitely not anything WWE would ever give you. This is somebody different. And in a lot of ways, when I first laid eyes on him, he reminded me of Allen Iverson, because it was, the NBA was a certain way. The guys most of the time had suits on. They spoke a certain way. They were professional. Here comes Iverson with his hat on backwards. He's tattooed. He's got the chains. It caused quite a stir for a long time for a lot of people when it was like, okay, this guy doesn't get it. He's he's not taking this seriously. And I don't think he meant any offense at all. It was just, hey, this is who I am. I'm not going to change for anybody. So much in that way, that's sort of how I viewed Punk. It's like, well, this guy is his own man. When did you first become aware of Punk? Did you follow this guy, Phil, before he got into WWE, before he got to OVW, I should say? Did you know who he was before then?
I didn't. I didn't follow him until probably the pipe bomb, if I'm being honest, because I was a WWE fan, but I was a lapsed WWE fan. So, I had seen the pipe bomb because somebody showed it to me. And this was, I think, the day after the episode of Raw aired, and I was just so amazed by it. Like, I watched it like 2 or 3 times, and I ended up going back and watching Raw after that, and I started watching again semi-regularly after that.
Yeah, he and you're not alone in that. I mean, a lot of people gravitated toward him after the pipe bomb, and it's understandable. And I don't think he was on the radar of a lot of fans at the time because, especially if they weren't what you would say diehard WWE fans. I mean, they may have heard the name, they may have been familiar who he was, but they couldn't really grasp what he was about until the pipe bomb. I watched the pipe bomb again yesterday for the first time in a while, and I can't say that it's something I don't watch regularly because honestly, and we'll get into this as the show goes on, but I watch the pipe bomb. I mean, I make a point to watch it at least once a month, and I make a point to listen to the podcast with him and Cabana at least once a month. If as soon as I get around to it, I'll just put it in my ears, and I could either be writing or I could be moving around doing something else, and I'll just be listening to it because if you are a hardcore lifer, like in terms of being a pro wrestling fan, it's important to hear, I think, and it's important to know this guy's story. So the pipe bomb opened all kinds of doors for this guy. He was already a WWE Superstar. He was already a 2-time world champion. I mean, he had done a lot of things in that company. He had been to the upper echelon of the business, and people knew who he was, and he had a great reputation for being a very solid worker in the ring and a fantastic guy on the mic. But man, that pipe bomb when you first saw the pipe bomb, man, I mean, where was your head at when you first watched what he did that night?
Well, like I said, I was a lapsed fan, and just where the product was and what I was used to, when I stopped watching, he kind of hit a lot of the notes on why I stopped watching. And so, at the time I was looking at it, and this is before, I started writing about it. So, this is before I understood a lot of things like works and, what is a shoot and all this other stuff. I was like, boy, this looks real. Like, I just kept thinking that, like, this looks real. Like, even if they knew about it, did they know he's going to say this? Did they know he's going to say that? Like, it probably is the most believable promo I've ever seen.
Yeah, you couldn't really tell what was, and dude, I don't know about you. I hate the word scripted. I've always hated it. Yeah. When I actually got in the business myself, I don't think, in my time in the locker rooms then and now, I don't think I've ever been around anyone that even used the word scripted. And that, to me, was a fan thing. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's a WWE lingo they throw around all the time. Who knows? But I never personally heard that from anybody. Well, Tom, but we're going to do these promos and they're scripted. Never. I never heard that in my life. But at the time, I guess I didn't know what was all him, what was suggested by them, what was he allowed to say, what wasn't he allowed to say. I mean, honestly, at the time, it felt very real. Now, them cutting his mic off should have been an indication that it was BS, that a lot of this they already knew ahead of time. But I will say this for him, it really did add to the feel of it. And I think at that point, even fans in attendance were like, okay, maybe this isn't set up after all. Maybe he's saying stuff they don't want him to say. It was a nice touch, man. I think it really got the point across at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once they cut his mic off, it kind of, brings it back to reality. Like, oh yeah, this is like a big production. And so it does raise the question, like, they could have cut his mic off like 10, 20 minutes ago.
Right.
They could have cut his mic off immediately. but it still just felt so believable. Just, I mean, and that just speaks to how much he believed what he was saying, and that speaks to just how great he is as a promo guy.
Absolutely. And we got to talk about some of the stuff he said, because now, and dude, looking back on it now, it's not shocking anymore, because a lot of the stuff he said has become the norm. At the
Oh yeah.
time, at the time, no one was saying it. I mean, that's the thing. Now, I will give credit where credit's due, and a lot of fans overlook this guy, but Joey Styles was really the first one to do this pipe bomb, and he did it against Jerry Lawler on Raw.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, I remember.
oh yeah, dude. To me, when this happened with Punk, people were talking about, oh, it's the pipe bomb. This is the pipe bomb, and man, he went off script, and I'm like, wait a minute, this sounds a lot like Joey Styles with ECW, which is Joey doesn't get enough credit. That thing was magnificent. He was a little too rehearsed, in my opinion. It didn't feel real the way he was. It was almost like he was reading lines from a script, but it's okay. I mean, he still got his point across. Punk felt very real to me, and it just didn't feel like it was, okay, go read this, memorize this, and read it, because that's not what happened. And, there's been stories through the years of him being handed stuff to read and him making a point of tearing it up in front of the person that delivered it to him before they walked away, just so they would know, hey, look, this is not me. You're not going to tell me what to say or how to say it. But a lot of the stuff he said in this promo, man, was just, like I said, now it's come to pass. We quote it. We can quote. A lot of us can quote this thing on top of our heads. And it's kind of where we are now in this business, especially in that company. But, man, he talked about, John Cena, all this talk about Cena being the best, but that's not true because I'm the best. And he talked about not being on the programs. He's not on the cups. He's not in the signature that's produced at the beginning of the show. And when he starts talking all this stuff, even if you didn't like him, you're like, wow, he's kind of got a point. So I think he probably won over even those fans who were still going for the heel versus babyface thing. I don't know if a lot of them didn't really get their heads turned at that second and said, well, maybe this guy's got a point. I mean, how real did this feel to you when you watched this? Were you buying into everything he said, or did you feel like I'm gonna have to hear a little bit more? Did this make you immediately say, I got to follow this guy now? I mean, how much of this did you really buy into?
Well, like I said, it felt like a very believable promo. But the thing that was striking for me was I was never a Cena guy. Like, I just never really bought into Cena. And that's not to say that Cena's bad or, that I hated Cena. It was just something about Cena that I just never really bought into. Um, and it could be like his whole gimmick was that he's this rapper, and it just never felt authentic to me. And I mean, that's not to, again, no knock at John. I think John is great at what he did. But I think Punk resonated with me a lot more because, I just felt like he was the polar opposite of what John was. And, he's from my hometown and all these other things, but it just the fact that he was also up there saying, like, no, Cena is not the best. I am the best. And, like, I felt him on that.
It's Superman and Batman. Really. I mean, when you come right down to it, you can't relate to John Cena. I can't. I mean, he's a nice guy, but dude, he's jacked up. He's got the perfect face, the perfect body, the perfect hair. Everything's great. Perfect smile. Come from a great family. Was raised, I assume, not in any kind of poverty or anything like that. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe his family struggled when he was a kid. I don't know the guy's full story, but it never felt that way. It felt like his family did okay for themselves. So for a lot of fans, they can't really, associate with that. And plus his persona in the ring can't be hurt. He bounces back up after a finishing move that would have pinned anybody else on the planet. He pops right back up and is laughing about it. And he did that a lot. And that's a lot of the stuff that turned fans against him, was that he popped back up quick. I used to sit there and time how long he sold a finisher before popping back up, brushing it off, hitting the 5 knuckle and all that crap, and getting the pin, and then celebrating. and never selling a thing after the match was over. And I'm like, dude, you just took a finisher 2.3 minutes ago. Are you kidding right now? So, but then you look at Punk, and they've made those jokes before about, oh, he looks like the guy that would work on your car. Well, yeah, but who can you relate to more? The perfect guy or the guy that looks like a working class guy? Dude, I'm relating to Punk every time. And like you said, it's nothing against John. I like John. I always have. But Punk just feels like, okay, you can hang out with one of these two guys. Who do you want to hang out with? I'd hang out with Punk because that's the kind of guy I would probably get along with a lot quicker than I get along with someone that looks and sounds like John. And maybe that's me stereotyping where I shouldn't. But I think that's where a lot of fans immediately jumped on the Punk bandwagon because they're like, this guy's all right. And dude, I've for years I've said he has the Dusty Rhodes charisma. He's got the Stone Cold charisma where it's like he looks like a guy that could walk into any room that you're in and he wouldn't look out of place. He would look like a guy. And not that he didn't have star power, but you see what I'm saying? He had it, but at the same time, he wasn't untouchable like a John Cena, like a Roman Reigns, where they feel like they're so far above and they're spotlighted so heavily. And Punk just felt like one of the guys to me.
Yeah. He definitely felt like, if you look at him, he doesn't look like a wrestler, but he was so good at his promo stuff that it was kind of like, no, I'm going to make you notice me. Like, regardless if you're looking at that guy over there that might be taller than me or bigger than me or might be able to do these bigger spots than me, I'm going to make you notice me. And that's what was always so cool about him to me.
Yeah, and dude, honestly, now that years after the fact, I've gone back and watched his work against Samoa Joe in Ring of Honor, and it's some of the best stuff ever. And he was really himself then, and doing it the same shtick he did in WWE. But yeah, like you said, man, he made you stand up and take notice of him. And let's call it for what it is. Dusty is my all-time favorite, and I can't help myself. Dusty was a father figure to me for a lot of years in my childhood, and he never knew it, but. He was somebody I idolized as a kid growing up. But let's be real. When you look at Dusty, you're like, that's not a superstar. But then you hear him talk. And you're like, oh my God, this guy. If you didn't know who Dusty was, you would swear he's an actor. He would think, well, he's got to be a football player. He's got to be somebody. Did you hear that guy talk? I mean, you just knew that he had something. And I think that Punk, in his own way, has that too. I think he still has it. Where he's just, when he picks up the microphone, dude, you stop what you're doing. Like, dude, I'd be watching Raw or SmackDown or whatever it was and writing a column at the same time. But every time Punk got the mic in his hands, I stopped and watched the TV because I wanted to see it. I wanted to hear him. And there's very few guys you can say that about, right? So to me, he's one of those guys. Something else in the promo, the pipe bomb promo that he talked about, and this is good stuff, was, he would like to think that one day things would change when Vince is dead. But, the problem is that he's going to give the company to his idiot daughter and his doofus son-in-law. And it's just going to be the same crap. And I'm like, that's great stuff. Even if you did like Hunter and Stephanie, it didn't matter. Because, man, the crowd reacted to that one. I mean, that was great.
Yeah, and I mean, growing up, Trips has always been the bad guy, so I've never liked him, and that's not me looking at any of the politicking stuff or whatever the perception is about him backstage. Just as a fan of, I don't know, even if I'm just saying as a fan of The Rock, I was never a Triple H fan, so I was always against him. He's the bad guy in my opinion. Even if Punk in this situation is the heel, I don't root for Triple H. I never have.
Yeah, I mean, it just gets ingrained into your head, right? Like you said, as a kid, it's something you see all the time. Like growing up, I knew Ric Flair was a bad guy. And as I got older, I still knew he was a bad guy, but then he would do stuff that was awesome. And I started kind of liking him a little bit. And then it's like, wait a minute, I'm not supposed to be cheering for this guy. He's a bad guy. But, Ric's awesome. He's the greatest of all time. And it's just, I couldn't help myself. But no, I mean, I always pulled for Dusty against the Horsemen. Whoever the Horsemen were facing, that's who I was pulling for. And it was very rarely that I ever sided with anybody in the Horsemen, unless it was Rick when he turned face the couple of times that he did in Jim Crockett Promotions. So you're right, man. It gets in your head, and that's what you see. Something else that Punk talked about in this promo, of course, was the way that people are who are around Vince. Because he said, he surrounds himself with glad-handling yes men who tell him everything he wants to hear. And he talked about, The Rock kissing up to him, called him Dwayne, which is not anything that ever happened either at the time. But he said, The Rock kissed up to him, and he mentioned, he said he was a Paul Heyman guy. And he basically laid out the next year or so of his WWE career. He basically said, without knowing that he did it, he was basically like, look, Paul Heyman's going to come here, and he's going to be back, and I'm going to be with him, and it's going to be me against the world. I mean, without him knowing it, all of that stuff kind of came to pass. But, dude, that's one of the big criticisms against WWE, even today, years later, is that Vince surrounds himself with people who just nod and say, you got it, boss. Yes, sir, boss. You're right about that. Yes, sir, you're right about that. I mean, dude, honestly, how much of that do you think is real? And how much of that do you think is just us wanting to believe it's real?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both. I do think that Vince is very comfortable in the situation he's in. Not as much so now as he was then, because there was no competition for him at the time. So I think he was very comfortable in the situation he was in. And I think he definitely had people around him that didn't challenge him. But then at the same time, we love an anti-authority guy. Like, that's kind of why Austin was Austin. So it regardless if it was 100% true, we all kind of want to believe Punk, because Punk's the guy. Punk's the guy that stands up to his boss, and we like that guy.
Yeah, it's easy to support someone like that because he says the things that you want to say, and the issue is that guys like us don't have that platform. We do when we write, but it's different. We don't have a worldwide platform on national television like he did. So he was able to get on the air live and say whatever he wanted to. And yeah, like you said, man, it's easy to pull for him. But what's funny is that years later, looking back on that, Vince McMahon believed that was a heel promo. The whole thing. Does that blow your mind?
Of course he does, because, I mean, look at all this stuff that Daniel Bryan was doing about a year ago. And that stuff is technically not heel stuff. He's talking about saving the planet and all these other things that are true, but those are all heel promos.
Right, because at the end of the day, kids, as we all know, it all depends, everything in that company that happens, whether it's good or bad, is at the whim of one guy. And he's the one that decides. But yeah, dude, he thought Punk's promo was a heel promo. So, well, he's going to talk bad about us, and that's going to baby us out and heel him out. And I'm like, my God. Punk, I mean, it's mind-blowing. Punk later called him an out-of-touch old man. And I'm sorry, but he is. He's a rich out-of-touch old man. That's great. But, dude, I don't know the last time he's really been in tune, and been able to do the kind of things that, it's something that happens tonight, 6 months from now, we would go, oh, I see why that happened now. I don't remember the last time I said that about anything WWE, because I swear it just feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants. We go on the air, win 30 minutes. Let's rewrite the whole freaking show. I mean, Punk was right. I'm sorry. At the end of the day, he's right about everything he said. And it was meant to get that rise out of you. It was meant to stir your emotions. But I don't think it was meant to get him over as a face at all, because according to him, he had yet to sign his contract. He was still gone. And this was just one last promo. This was, the one of the writers came up to him before the show that night and said, you're not going to believe this. They just want you to go out and talk. And he's like, wow, really? And yeah, now listen, whatever details came after that, we're not privy to. And if there are details, I've never heard or read about them, where it's like, look, here's some bullet points. Here's what we'd like you to hit on, and just go wild. But I don't know that there was, but I don't know that there wasn't. The point is, going back to the mic being cut off, dude, if they didn't want him doing that, he would never have been allowed to do that. So,
yeah,
people praise the pipe bomb, and they should, because it's Punk and he's great. But at the same time, we can't really sit here and say, looking back on it, we can't really sit here and say, oh man, what a great thing. Man, he really stuck it to him. No, he didn't. No, because it was in a controlled environment. He didn't do this on Sports Center. You know, he didn't do this on YouTube on his own channel. This was him on their show, which tells you that they sponsored it, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the magic of wrestling. I think I absolutely think it was a work. There's no way it couldn't have been a work. But
Right.
at the same time, I do believe that a lot of what he said was based in truth, and I think a lot of it was based in his truth. And I think again that's what made it such a believable promo, because it wasn't like they told him, "Oh yeah, go out there and say these bad things about us." It was just like, go out there and talk. And he had all of these things that he was already upset with them about, and so he was like, "Oh yeah, I got it."
Oh yeah, like you don't have to tell me twice. Just point me where's the ring. I'll get out there. Oh man, that's great. And you know what's awesome? And we're bouncing around a little bit right now because we'll get through this whole thing. But what's funny is that everything he said on that stage is the same thing he said on Colt's podcast. It's the same thing he's saying now. Nothing's changed. You know, it's like, well, how do you know so and so is not lying? Well, has their story changed in 10 years? If the answer is no, they're probably not lying. Because at some point, somebody would have come up and said, nope, everything he said is crap. I mean, people have tried to fight him. People have tried to come out and speak against him and say, well, he's exaggerating. Yeah, but I don't know that he is. I don't know that he exaggerated anything. I mean, you know, in his version of the way things went then, and we'll get into that when we get into the Cabana podcast, right? But, you know, in his version of the way things went, he absolutely was slighted. He absolutely was left out in the cold. He absolutely was ignored. He absolutely was not listened to, and they just took a crap on him. And the seeds of that, of the next 2 years that followed of his life, the seeds of that were sown in that pipe bomb. And, you know, had he walked away, just imagine if he had cut that promo, and then, what was it, 2 weeks after that, he faced John for the title in Chicago. Just imagine had he not won the belt that night. Well, if he showed up in Chicago and said, I changed my mind. I know it's my hometown. I know I'm supposed to go over tonight. I don't really care. I just want to go home. I mean, it still would have been an amazing moment. I just wonder how different the landscape would be now had things gone just a little bit differently. Have you ever thought about, what if things change and he actually did split that night instead of just taking the title, going home and throwing it in the refrigerator and taking a picture of it? That would have been crazy.
I sometimes just wonder what it would have been like if he had won that night and then just stayed gone for a while and just showed up at other promotions with the belt. Just how wild would it have been if he showed up at New Japan with the WWE Championship? Like, that would have been crazy.
Yes.
But I mean, just the threat of it was just I just will never forget him winning it. Just the how loud that crowd got that night was just, I mean, it was just unbelievable.
And that match, man, I'm telling you, if anybody out there has not seen that match, you got to go watch it. Because to your point, that was, I mean, Hawk and Amma would have been proud of that pop, brother. I mean, that was great stuff. They were so ready for that. And a red hot crowd. I mean, I just wish that it had been Cult of Personality instead of that god-awful, generic, you know, metal music that he used to come out to. I mean, it was Randy Orton's throwaway music. Do you like that music for real?
So I'm very torn, and it's not that I like Fire Burns, but it's so emblematic of that part of his career that I always think about it when I think of Punk. Like, there's no way, like, I mean, just him coming out that night and it cutting on and just how loud the crowd got when he came out. Like, it just is so ingrained in my memory that, you know, a lot of times I think of it more than I think of Cult of Personality. Now, of course, Cult of Personality is a better song.
Oh, yeah.
But I almost feel like Fire Burn fits him more as a character.
Well, I mean, I'll give you that. I can't argue too much with that. I wasn't a fan of it, especially knowing that it was Randy Orton's first song. And man, there's some symmetry there, right? There's interesting things.
Yeah.
I mean, stuff between those two guys. I don't know if it ever got really weird, but we might as well go ahead and start talking about it. The Colt Cabana podcast, man, because Punk mentioned the line about you're going to amend the drug policy, so to give someone one more strike where they can either fail or they can continue to do drugs, whatever they want to do, and still keep their job. And I'm like, I know who he's talking about. Okay,
there's more than one person that is very obvious that he's talking about.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And he mentioned Randy a couple of times, but I don't think he ever threw Randy under the bus that I know of. But that podcast was more or less about him getting things off his chest. I mean, I got to jump back for just a second, man. So the pipe bomb really, it turns everything over for him. It puts him, what do they say? Straps a rocket to him. It really did. And suddenly all these other places are calling WWE wanting this guy. The major sports networks, and this was before WWE got cozy with ESPN. This before anybody else got cozy with WWE in terms of, the late night talk shows were on board already, but not to the degree maybe they are now. And man, podcasts wanted them, and radio shows wanted them, and TVs, and it was crazy. And strike while the iron is hot, right? It's the absolute truth, and they did in the beginning. And I thought, this is great because man, this guy has worked himself to death to get here. And it's good to see someone finally get something they worked for. And this is nice to see because it was a feel-good story for me. Like, no, I wasn't the guy's biggest fan before he got to WWE. I can't say I was a huge fan when he got there. But, dude, the more he talks and the more he works, and to me, he kind of grows on you. He grew on me. But, man, it was good to see him finally achieve success in that company.
It was, and it's just... It's so many things that are fascinating about his rise and kind of his descent and exit from the company, because it's kind of like he did all of these things in that short period of time, and it just completely changed the industry. And that's not to say he's the first person to do like a shoot style promo, whether that be the pipe bomb or the podcast, but just how much it changed everything. Like, one of the things that I think a lot from the podcast is when he said that Jericho called him and gave him the chance to come on his podcast before he did Colts, and he didn't do it. He did Colt because Colt was his friend. And you look now, and Jericho has taken that formula of that episode of Art of Wrestling, and he does that with everybody that leaves WWE now.
He did it. He did it on his own show, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's done that to help other guys get over, because it was such a big when Punk did it. I mean, even when you just look at who Punk is, and that Punk was a indie darling that became a WWE superstar. You look at so many guys that have done that since. And again, that's not to say he was the first one to do it, but I definitely think he changed what it meant to be an indie wrestler that made it. I mean, when you look at Seth Rollins and you look at a lot of these other guys that came from ROH, they kind of have the prestige on them that he helped to create. And I don't think I'm often saying that. Like, I mean, there's tons of guys at NXT that are there, and they're there, and they got to come behind another indie guy that made it cool to be an indie darling.
And, I was talking about the Allen Iverson thing earlier. Dude, now versus before Punk, how many guys now look like Punk versus before Punk?
Oh, yeah. If you can say that Sean and Brett kind of created this new generation of smaller guys. They made it okay to be smaller technical wrestlers. I would say that Punk and Bryan were the extension of that for this generation.
I agree with that. Absolutely. They're the next I'm actually watching the documentary DVD right now, and it was his debut on ECW. And just for a second, I got lost in the moment of him coming out and those fans touching him. And there was a little kid who just made this face like he just met God. Like, oh, it's the greatest thing ever. He's like celebrating with his dad and stuff. This is so cool. But no, dude, you're totally right about that. Like, he did set the tone. And how many guys, man, can you really point the finger to and say, okay, trendsetter? That's who he is. He's a trendsetter. He's the next phase. He is the next chapter. Punk was the next chapter. In as much as Shawn and Brett was the next chapter, Punk was the chapter after that, I think. I mean, you could say Austin was, yeah, you can. But I mean, you know, Austin he's a whole other level, right? I mean,
yeah.
Punk was another chapter in terms of, like I said, how many guys now look like him? Dude, would Aleister Black have ever gotten a second look from Vince McMahon had it not been for CM Punk?
How many guys started doing the GTS because Punk started doing it because of Tommy?
Right.
Well, not Tommy, but Kenta.
Yes.
How many guys started doing how many guys started doing there's another move that he was doing a lot of the knees and the kicks he was doing.
Oh,
and that's,
yeah.
Again, that's not to say that he started that, but it's just the fact that he brought the appeal of indie wrestling to a mainstream stage.
And you know what? When you were talking about that, it made me think of Gangrel. I don't think Gangrel gets the credit he deserves, because how many guys were doing those suplexes? How many guys were doing those trap suplexes? You know what I mean? Those throws. I mean, Taz did, but it was different. He was the muscled up guy, and Gangrel was just, he did that, you know, what Edge started calling the execution, where he'd you know, hook up their arms, but then he would spin around and then land and sit down with him. No one was doing that kind of stuff before Gangrel. And to your point, how many guys were throwing the knees? How many guys were doing forearms? I mean, a few, but it was New Japan, if you were watching.
Yes, that's what I mean. He brought that niche style of wrestling to WWE. And there's so many guys now that are also indie wrestlers like him, or also New Japan guys that are doing it too. And I mean, again, that's not to say that he started it, but he kind of introduced it to a different audience.
Yeah, he made it mainstream for that company. Yeah, no doubt about it. And, you know, just as an aside, if I can go there, forearms make so much more sense than a closed fist, don't they?
They do.
I mean, yeah, you're going to get cauliflower ears in about 6 months or less. That's true, and that's hideous. But at the same time, dude, if right now you squared up with somebody and you both started throwing fists, one of you's going to be on the ground in no time, and either out cold, or you're going to break your knuckles, or you're going to bust something. You may even crack his jaw, legit break his jaw. I mean, it makes more sense for forearms, because a forearm won't necessarily knock you out, but if hit hard enough, if Suzuki hits you with a forearm, brother, you're gonna feel it in the morning, because that's how he works, you know. So,
yeah, I mean, for me, and I watch a lot of New Japan and a lot of indie stuff now, but you know, again, when I first started watching Punk matches after the pipe bomb, like that was my first that was my first foray into that kind of wrestling. So when I started watching it afterwards, it was like, oh no, this is like really, really good. And again, I don't want anybody to think, because, you know, I know people will be like, but Punk didn't start that. Again, Punk didn't start it, but it's just the fact that he managed to make that style work in a company that hadn't done that before.
Exactly. And how many people can you honestly say, and you probably count them on one hand, originals? Use the word original. Okay, Gorgeous George. Sure. I mean, it's hard after that. I mean, we're talking originals. I mean, if you thought long enough, you probably could. But, dude, even who you pick, that person was inspired by somebody.
Yeah.
So, no, Punk wasn't new at any of this. But by taking what he loved and what he was good at and doing it his way and putting his own spin on it, he made it cool. Right?
Right.
I mean, to your point, how many talents were doing X, Y, and Z until he did it. One of the things I love about this guy is that he's never changed. Ever. I mean, from the moment he got to OVW to ECW, to the main roster, to afterward, he's still the same guy. He hasn't changed his ideals. He hasn't changed his outlook on life. I mean, everything's changed around him and things have happened to him and because of him. But, and look, folks, he's not perfect. Don't misunderstand me here. Neither one of us are even suggesting that. This guy's as human as the rest of us. But I do think that a lot of the crap that happened in that company to him was crap. And it wasn't deserved. Dude, from the minute he won that title from John, it seemed like they were doing everything they could to ruin him. Am I crazy?
Well, I think it's what they always do. I think when somebody gets over and they don't understand them, they kind of try and figure out like, oh, we better figure out a way to show everybody that you don't really like this as much as you think you do. And we've seen them do that quite a few times where it's like, no, the crowd's telling you we like this guy or we like this woman. And they're also like, oh, you guys really don't. I mean, Rusev Day. I mean, how over was Rusev? And they were just kind of like, oh, well, I don't know if they really like you, Rusev, or they just like to chant. I mean, it's just like when AJ debuted at the Rumble and he got that huge pop. Just for Vince to be like, oh, well, I didn't know if that was real. I thought it was a fluke. Like, this is AJ Styles. This is one of the best wrestlers in the world. This is a guy that's been a star everywhere he's gone.
But he didn't know that. Vince didn't know that because he didn't watch.
But yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm like, I think some people in the company knew what they had in AJ when they first got him. But I think they were also like, well, let's put this guy to the ringer a little bit because you guys don't really like him as much as you think. And when it hasn't subsided and he's still super popular, they're like, oh, well, we better do something with this guy. It's like they always do that. They always wait until it's like we don't have a choice. They kind of did it with Becky, too.
Absolutely. And, dude, it's like they in their minds have the version of what they want you to see. And when a guy or gal is not that version and becomes something else, they have to pull back and say, no, we need you to be this. And they'll pull them off TV. They'll make them start jobbing everybody on the roster. They'll give them a terrible promo. They'll cut their TV time down. They'll do everything in their power to get that star, get that person to be what they need them or think they should be, instead of just allowing that person to breathe and to grow and to learn and get better. I mean, I don't know of any of us from any walk of life who could step into any job today and just, man, from the day you get there, you're held back. I mean, look, I'm paid to do a job. I get it. Just pay me. It's all good. What would you like me to do today? I'll try to do the best I can. But every time you go to do your job, they're second guessing you and they're not allowing you to do something. And dude, I can't wrap my head around that. Just imagine being in that company and just not being allowed to do. It's like, look, you brought me in because you thought I was good at what I do. Okay, great. I'm here. Let me do it. Why won't you just let me do it? That feels like Punk's story from day one.
Well, that's because they didn't bring anybody in because they thought they were great at what they did somewhere else. They brought them in because you're the top star at that company, and that company is our competition. Right. So we want you so that you won't be there. And it's not a matter of we want you so we can use you as well as they did. We just don't want them to use you anymore. We want you to work for us.
And, maybe this was the first opportunity we had to see that. Really?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it. We saw it with WCW when they started bringing in all the WCW guys, and a lot of those guys turned into a joke.
True.
I mean, I don't think Booker reached the heights that he should have with WWE that he did with WCW. I don't think he was taken as seriously, in my opinion, as a world champion as he was there. Not
at all. And that's a whole other podcast for me because, Hunter should have done the job to him. And
yeah, I did.
I mean, the whole white versus black thing wasn't called for. Didn't need to happen. It didn't. When I knew that's where they were going, I thought, "Are you kidding me? We're going to reduce this guy to that. We're going to make this about color. Are you freaking kidding? How good this guy is." And that's what this is going to be about. Like, to this day, I shake my head on that. I just don't know why that. I don't get it. No one cared about that until let's exploit this and let's, Triple H is very, not so subtly. I mean, basically.
Oh, boy, that promo's bad.
Oh man, wasn't it? I mean,
so bad. Oh, it's horrible.
It was terrible. And him just, dude, he almost, maybe this isn't fair, but if he'd let the N-word slip, I wouldn't have been surprised at all. I would have been
it was right there. I mean, he all but said it. And that's why I'm like, every time I think about it, I'm like, look, there's a way for you to galvanize support with those kind of things. Do I think it's the right thing to do? No, absolutely not. I mean, you saw like Cornette do certain things like that with New Jack, and it works, but you have to reward your audience afterwards. You can't do that and then have the guy that just appeared to say that someone's not worthy because of the color of their skin beat them. Like, you just, it doesn't make sense.
Oh no, not at all. Yeah, exactly. And Booker could have went over, and it would have been great.
That could have been one of the biggest wins of his career if you do it correctly. And that's why I'm like, the promo itself is bad, and just all of the inclinations of it are bad. But if you stick the landing of it, it's remembered as one of the biggest wins of his career. But
absolutely,
you had him lose.
And not only had him lose, but look at the amount of time it took Triple H to roll over and pin him.
You had him lose clean.
Yes.
You had him lose clean as a whistle.
Yes. It was a statement.
It was bad. That was very, very bad.
And listen, Triple H is part of Punk's story too, folks. That's where we're going with this. And I'll say this to wrap up the Booker T part of this. For me, is that the whole thing, of course, none of this stuff had to happen, obviously. And Hunter wants to compare himself to Flair as champion. Brother, Flair would have put Booker over. Period. And if the plan had been for Flair to go over, Rick would have said, "No, sir, Booker's hot. We need it. He's getting the title." And he would have made it happen. So I'm sorry. But all that talk about, Triple H, come on, give me a break. I'm not falling for that. Tom Clark's 6M podcast is sponsored in part by Radius Law Group. Every day, Radius helps individuals, families, small businesses, and nonprofit organizations throughout North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania resolve their legal issues by providing effective legal counsel in the areas of estate planning, as well as elder law and Medicaid. Radius Law holds the radical belief that working with a lawyer can indeed be enjoyable. So give them a call at 1-800-519-5667 for more information and tell them that Tom Clark's 6M podcast sent you. So let's listen. We're talking about him. Let's talk about him. Triple H beats Punk. The whole summer Punk thing. The guy's red hot. It's going nuts. Alberto Del Rio comes in out of nowhere, beats him. First of all, I'm like, wait a minute, what? When he beat him, I was like, I cannot believe I'm seeing this right now. And then to make matters worse, Triple H comes along, beats him too. I'm like, the minute he pinned him in that match, I was just shaking my head. And I was like, of course he pinned him. At that point, we were all pretty much in the loop. We all pretty much knew, okay, Triple H is behind the scenes. I don't know if his job title then is what it is now. Maybe not. But, dude, come on. The guy came out of retirement, as Punk said, to pin him, and then he went back into retirement. Like, please. You know what I mean?
That's always one of the funniest parts of the pipe bomb. I mean, not the pipe bomb, but the podcast. And when he's saying, I don't know that the guy has a problem with me, but the way it looks, you came out of retirement to beat me and then went back into retirement. It sure looks like you have a problem with me.
It's crazy. And it killed his momentum.
And I mean, all of this stuff with, like, you go out of your way to bring Nash back. And
oh, that was terrible.
All of that stuff was so bad. It just, and I mean, when you really think about Triple H and his career, it's not that surprising, because I always say all the time in the Attitude Era, the fact that Triple H is centered as such a big star at that time, when he's up against guys that are better than him, that are better characters than him. I mean, just the fact that he was always pitted against The Rock is crazy to me. Like, The Rock is a megastar, and you've got him losing to Triple H. Why?
ego, I guess. The unwillingness to step aside. All that. What's best for business? Hoo-ha is exactly that. It's hoo-ha. It's nothing. It's a catchphrase. It doesn't mean anything.
No, yeah.
I mean, and trust me, guys, I am not a Triple H hater at all. I'm not. Being executive in the top pro wrestling company in the world, yeah, you're well paid, but I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of drama. I'm sure it's not an easy job. And you know what? I don't discount anything he does today in his position. I don't. And I'm not one of those guys that say, you know how you got that job. I don't know if I even believe that. I mean, if Vince thought this guy couldn't handle himself, I don't think he would be in this position at all, honestly. And let's face it, had the cards been played differently, Shawn Michaels would have been in that position, I believe. Had Shawn cleaned himself up earlier, had he not wrestled maybe as long as he did, had things been a little bit differently, Vince loves this guy. And had Shawn been willing to do it, I mean, we could have been talking about Shawn in that position all these years and not married to the boss's daughter either.
Yeah. I mean, despite some of my issues with booking around Triple H, and despite some things that, I've heard him say in interviews that I didn't too much agree with, I think he's still going to go down as one of the best heels in wrestling. I mean, you can't take that away from him. And I think he's had a fantastic career. I think he's done some things to help develop NXT and other things that are also great. But I think he's also stifled some people's careers. I think that's just a fact of the matter. I mean, I'm not sure all of the reasons why, but I mean, you can point to a number of people where he has.
Oh, for sure. And it's, I like the way you said that. Not sure of all the reasons why. Dude, there's probably so much stuff that we're never going to know. And I don't know who will write the tell-all book about this guy. And honestly, who has enough that we haven't heard already? Maybe nobody. I mean, let's be fair. Who really has the scoop on the truth? Dude, you would think someone would have said it by now. We've heard this. We've already heard, oh, it's the golden shovel. And forget the sledgehammer, he's got a shovel. And it's, okay, give me another one. What else you got? I mean, we've already heard all this stuff. I don't think there's anything to make us go, oh my God, he did what? I don't, maybe there is. I don't know. I'd be surprised because I would think by now it would have come out by somebody, knowing how people talk in this business. But no, I don't think there's any smoking gun with this guy. I think it's a combination of a whole lot of things that make him appear to be the bad guy. And, I don't know if it's for me to say he is or not, but I'll tell you this. He had no business pinning Punk at all. That never should have happened. And Punk made it clear that this guy never liked him from day one. He didn't care for him at all. And, Hunter made some offhand comments about Punk, whether he meant them or not. And at the time, and it's like, okay, I mean, you're just going to keep dissing this guy. He's on your payroll. I'll never understand why you would cut down talent that's in your company. And if you're all working toward the same goal, which is making money for the company, yes, everyone's getting paid. I get it. But, if this guy's not successful, that's a failure. I mean, for everybody. Why is it just, well, I got to get mine and this guy sucks, so screw him. Yeah, but you can't say that once you're in the corporate part of this company. I mean, I don't know. I think cooler heads should have prevailed, and whoever's idea it was for Triple H to come out of retirement and pin this guy, that thing should have been shut down because I do think it killed him. And Punk doesn't seem to have a problem with Del Rio, but I still don't understand that part of it either. So, dude, this whole thing, the whole thing from the moment of the pipe bomb, just starts feeling convoluted to me. Like it starts getting watered down, and it happens very fast, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, that's kind of how they do things. Like they will, once they get a big moment, it's like they kind of don't know what to do with it. Like they, him, the pipe bomb and him winning at Money in the Bank, all of that in a vacuum is perfect. Like if you just look at those two things on their own, they're perfect. But once you get past that and you get to his return and the Del Rio stuff and all the rest of this stuff, and till he wins the title again, it's just all over the place. And I mean, his title reign was great, but there's some stuff in that reign that's kind of weird too. But that's just kind of the story of this company. They will give us a great moment, and then they kind of don't know what to do with it. It's kind of like Becky winning the Rumble. Like her winning the Rumble and the night after is so perfect. Like it just seems like nope, just you got everything you need. You have the story right here. It's Becky versus Ronda at WrestleMania. Nope, we got to mess with it. No, don't mess with it.
Right.
Leave it alone.
Right. You know, it's the same thing. And going back to Hunter for a second, it's the same thing when Daniel Bryan won at WrestleMania 30. I mean, had it just ended there, you would have been like, wow, that was great. That was so good. This is exactly what should have happened. This is the best day ever. I'm so happy for this guy because the fans wanted it. They made it happen. And freaking finally, because they spent a lot of time trying to make it not happen. I mean, came out on national television and made fun of this guy's height and size and everything about him. And dude, at first it's like, all right, Tom, relax. They're heels. You're supposed to get mad. But dude, when they do it every single show, even on shows he's not on, I'm like, okay, now you're just doing it because this is how you feel. You're taking shots. This is not pro wrestling storytelling anymore. This is you're taking shots at this guy. And I don't care what the rationale is. Well, we're taking shots at his character. BS. No, you're not. You're taking shots at him. And then after, this kept on and kept on. They were doing the yes chants in the football stadiums and baseball and basketball. Every place in the country, major sporting events, who didn't even know who Daniel Bryan was doing it. And call it for what it is, a lot of the fans didn't know who he was. And he was over like crazy. Finally, they said, well, fine, just put him over for the title. But dude, that Monday after that WrestleMania, I sat there and said, all right, let's see if they drop the ball. And they did, because that's what they do. Like you said, it's what they do. But the thing after Punk's win, again, convoluted to me. And dude, talk to me about the fact that as WWE champion, suddenly, and this is the guy that when he was world champion was not main eventing pay-per-views because he wasn't WWE champion. When he gets the WWE championship, he's not main eventing pay-per-views because the world champion's main eventing the pay-per-views. Like, that's not a coincidence. That's because it's Punk.
I mean, you can look at a number of guys that are also similar to Punk. I mean, just like I said with AJ finally got over, and then he gets this great WWE championship run, and he wasn't headlining a lot of shows either. I don't think Kofi headlined a lot of shows either as champion.
That's a good point. He headlined against Randy, I think.
I can't think of a single main event that Kofi had as champion.
It's mind blowing. And you know what? We say that he changed. And listen, Punk, you're right. Punk did change the landscape. He did. He forever changed that company, whether they want to admit it or not. But due to your point about Kofi and AJ, yeah, he changed it, but they still keep you under their thumb. They still keep you where they want you. I mean, I thought Aleister Black had crazy amounts of potential. And Aleister's been a joke from the time he got there. I'm sorry. It's how I feel. And I'm not saying he did anything wrong. I don't think he has. It's just they don't know what they're doing. And I don't know if I expect him to be Punk 2.0, but I think he very well could have been, and it could have been great because he's got that charisma, that intensity, and he can work, and he's got the look too, right?
Yeah, I mean, even if you're looking at it like he might not be a megastar, when you've got two guys as good as him and Ricochet, and you bring them up as a tag team, that doesn't make sense. You've got two guys that are phenomenal singles wrestlers, and you bring them in as a tag team, you have them lose as a tag team, and then after you split up the tag team, they're just kind of adrift. It's like, well, I mean, you've got a guy in Black who has legitimately some of the most believable strikes in wrestling. What are you doing with him? I mean, for a while he hadn't lost any matches, and he still is not challenging for a championship.
Dude, that black mask kick is the real deal, man. Holy God.
Yes, it's one of the best finishers right now, I think.
Yes. Yeah, it's honestly, I just during the documentary, I'll put it this way. Daniel Bryan said it best when he saw Punk winning Money in the Bank and stuff. And at one point, he was happy for his friend. He was happy to see him getting a shot. But then he followed up with, but I don't think it's going to work because he's not what they want. And I thought, that's perfect. That's exactly right. And neither was Daniel. Neither is Alistair. Neither is AJ. I'm sorry. Neither is AJ. Okay. And you know, Vince and AJ can be on the same page politically, which is another show, all day long. And they are. And that's fine. I don't care. But it doesn't help him because he's not what they want either. They want John, and they want Roman, and they want Taker, and they want Hogan. And that's who they want. That's what they want. And, you know, if Punk were 6'5", 6'6", 280, 300, no tattoos, maybe, sure. Okay, I'll bite. But, you know, the fact that he is what he is, the way he looks the way he looks, I'll say the same for AJ. I mean, in their warped, skewed way of looking at things, meaning Vince, that's all he sees. It's his perspective. He doesn't care about anybody else. It's mind-blowing to me that Punk got that shot, had the pipe bomb, everything was great for like 10 minutes, and then it all went downhill fast. I mean, I don't know. It's they take the belt off of him again. They turn him heel, which I didn't see coming. I mean, Punk's a great heel, and I love Paul Heyman, but I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. And then, you know, he took the time off and he came back. He's got the mutton chops, and it's different, and he's face again and all this other stuff. And I don't know, dude. I mean, I think it became pretty freaking obvious that it was, okay, this is not working out. This is probably going to end badly. And it did. I mean, it did. Had you heard anything leading up to his exit? Because I'm trying to think back about that time. If I'd heard any rumblings from anybody, whatever connections I may have had at the time, I don't recall anyone talking like, oh man, Punk's not happy. I mean, I don't recall hearing anything at the time that he left.
That was such a different time. That was before I was writing, before I was reading so much wrestling news. I wasn't keeping up with a lot of everything. I was just watching the product. I wasn't keeping up with any of the backstage happenings. So I hadn't heard anything until the podcast came out. And I'll never forget when the podcast came out, because it came out in November, right?
Yes, I think so.
It was either November or it was December. But I know that because I know it was the day after a holiday. And I want to say it was November because I think it was the day after Thanksgiving that I listened to it. And I'll never forget, I sat at work. At the time, I was working in an office, and it was the day after Thanksgiving. There was barely anybody in the office, so I was just basically there at my desk working and listening to the podcast. And there was barely anybody in office. And I'm just sitting listening to this thing and working, and then just like what? Like, what? It was wild. I mean, I feel like it was as much of an experience as listening to the pipe bomb in some ways, because it was just kind of like, what? And I mean, there's so many things from that podcast that have become like insider lingo, kind of like when you think of don't work yourself into a shoot, brother. Like those things, like that has become a part of wrestling culture. There's so many things from that podcast that have become a part of wrestling culture. It's wild.
Yeah, and it goes back to the fact that when Punk talks, you listen, because he's never been a guy to just talk for the heck of it. He doesn't talk to hear himself talk. He talks because he's got something to say. And when he speaks, it's a good idea to listen. And as I said before, for anybody that doesn't listen, has not listened to this podcast, or hasn't listened to it in a long time, I'm telling you, this is required listening at least once a month for hardcore fans, if for no other reason than to keep you honest, than to remind you the next time that you're able to go to a live WWE event and buy all the merch and spend all the money and take all the pictures and praise, oh, it's the most best show ever and what a great company. Really? Then listen to the show on the way home, because it's a slap in the face, because it's a reminder this is not what it appears to be. This is this guy's story. And by the way, not for nothing, but for any of his critics, why would he lie? Why would he do the show and lie from start to finish? I mean, what's in it for him to lie? Honest to God, to make himself look better? He's already established the fact he doesn't care what you think of him. So why even do the show unless he's telling the truth? I mean, call me naive, but that was my first thought upon hearing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some things like after he did the lawsuit and, it came out that he didn't exactly have a MRSA infection. And there's some things like that that people hold on to. Oh, well, he lied about that, so you don't know what else he lied about. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't think it's the point of whether he had a staph infection or not. It's the point that he kept coming to you and telling you, I'm injured, I'm sick. And they kept trying to coerce him to work. That's truth. There's other things that have come out of that company that are the same. There are other people that had the same story of saying, like, nope, I'm injured, and they still want us to wrestle.
And any veteran worker will tell you, you work hurt. Period. That's what you do. And what was the difference? What was it I heard? The quote I heard from someone recently was that there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. These guys work hurt all the time. But when you start working injured, that's when career-ending injuries are possible, when your livelihood is threatened, when your life is threatened. But, I mean, most of these guys and gals work hurt all the time, and Punk was no exception. But, dude, to your point, he went to them. It's not like he kept his mouth shut. He went to them for 3 straight months and said, something's wrong. I don't feel right. I'm sick all the time. I don't know why. I got a fever. I'm nauseated. I'm throwing up. I don't know what's going on, but I think it's related to this. And nobody, they just, like you said, you'll be okay. Take this. You'll be all right. And
take a Z-Pack.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Dude, there's screenshots now. You can go back and watch matches and you can see that place on him. I mean, it's there. It's visibly there. I mean, it's not like, there's proof to back it up. He had it. It's just, yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't understand why it's so hard. And, something Punk said during that podcast really stays with me is like, this should be the most fun place to work if you're a wrestler. It should be the best place ever. And, you hear talents now in AEW who talk about, I've never been happier. This is the best place to work. And I'm like, this is what they should be saying in WWE. But they don't, because it's all politics, because it's one guy calling the shots and it's hard to work and they don't let you do anything and you have to live through the prism of what they expect you to be or want you to be. It's night and day. You and I were talking recently and you made the comment about CM Punk in terms of AEW. What was it you said to me about that in terms of in terms of where the business has come today thanks to this guy?
Oh, I think it's pretty obvious just in terms of the fans that Punk has managed to reach. Like, I don't think there's a coincidence that a lot of guys that go to AEW are doing these podcasts similar to Punk. And everything that the Elite kind of stood for when they started their company, I don't think there would be an AEW without Punk. Everything that he stood for is kind of what they're doing. And I think that's why they wanted him so bad.
And I still, to this day, can't believe he hasn't made one appearance. The guy's done, kids. He's done. He's done. He doesn't care about it. At this point, it's 2020. I believe him. I didn't believe him for a while. I thought he's holding out for something. When AEW became a thing, I thought, oh, this may be what he's holding out for. Now we'll see him. Nope, we've not, because he doesn't care about it. He's done. He's over it. And I respect that. I'm not mad at him. I get it. But it would be great to see him there, wouldn't it?
It would, but when you really think about it, he was at the top of the mountain. Anybody would have thrown anything at him to get him there. I think if it was just about, I just want to wrestle, I think he would have showed up somewhere else. I think he would have showed up in New Japan he could have gone somewhere else if it was just about the wrestling. And that's how I kind of came to understand that it's just that he doesn't want it anymore. He doesn't want to wrestle. And so when AEW came along and Cody offered him the contract and he said no, it's like, yeah, he just doesn't want it. He just doesn't want to wrestle. And I think people still didn't believe it. He sat on this stage at Starcast and told you guys, like, look, I don't want to wrestle. That's just what it is. And people are still kind of like, well, he'll be back someday. No, he's told you, I do not want to wrestle. I'm done. And that's not to say never is never. He might change his mind someday, but I think he's being honest when he says he doesn't want it.
And it kills me, and I don't know. I mean, it kills me, but about Sean, because Sean said for years, "I'm done. There's no chance." And then he came back, and it's, oh God, dude, that's.
Oh, he came back for that match too.
That's terrible. So
yeah.
bad. I mean, I hope, and look, I'm not speaking this into being. I don't want it to become fact. I hope that doesn't put a black mark on him, because right now, the way I feel, I think it kind of does. And I'm not mad at him. I don't know. I can't say I understand why. It's a payday. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a payday. It's blood money. It's caught for what it is. But, man, I wish it had never happened. So, you know what? If I have to sit here and do this show and talk about, man, I wish he hadn't done All In. Yikes. I wish. You know what? If that's what it means, forget it. I don't want to see him come back. The fan of me wants to see him work again. But if that's part of the deal, that something, I don't want to say goes wrong, but something goes south and it's not what you hoped it would be, it's fine. Let him stay retired.
Yeah, I would rather him stay gone if he's not going to put his all into it. And I mean, I'm sure everybody wants to throw shade at him for doing MMA and failing, and MMA is tough, man. It's a tough sport to compete in. It's very, very tough to train for. So, I mean, regardless, my thing is I just want him to do what he wants and be happy. I mean, if that means he wants to do MMA again, great. If he wants to keep doing the analyst stuff that he was doing with backstage, that's great. I just want him to get to a place where he's not angry anymore about wrestling. And if it seems like he's gotten to that place, but he still doesn't want to wrestle.
I agree with that. It seems like he's made peace with it. And I'm like you, man. If you really are a fan of someone, you're going to be able to let them go. It won't be easy, but you got to accept it. You got to accept that. I mean, if the guy could talk to you one-on-one and say, "Look, don't you want to be happy? I just want to be happy. I'm not happy doing what I was doing. It's a chapter. It's not my life. I'm moving on." I mean, if a best friend said that to you face to face, or family member, you totally understand. But because it's him, and because he pisses people off the way he does, because he's out there, then people, oh, well, how dare you? And I'm like, what? You don't even know this guy. I mean, it's off topic, but when Edge came back, and there was all these people online, I'll never forget this. He'd posted something of a workout, and it was a surprise he was back and stuff. Someone on Twitter had said, "Edge, think about your family. This is a bad move." And I'm like, first of all, you don't even know who he is. You don't know Adam Copeland, right? It's not like you're his brother. Shut up. That's number one. First of all, shut up. Number two, you have the guts, the gall to talk about his family. You think that Edge just popped up off his couch one day and said, "I'm going to go back and wrestle. I'll catch you. Peace out. I'm out. I'm gone. I'm out of here." No, he didn't. That was a decision I'm sure he reached with his wife and his kids, and everyone was in full agreement. And if he wants to work, let him work and shut up about it. If he gets hurt, he gets hurt. No one wants to see him get hurt. If he wanted to stay retired, shut up about it. It's his life. It's crazy how we're in this culture of, well, I got to put my 2 cents worth in. I'm going to call you a villain because you didn't do what I wanted you to do. But who are you to me? Why does it matter to me what you say? I mean, what was it Punk said in the podcast? It was some kind of weird entitlement kind of thing people have. Dude, that's beyond ridiculous to me, man.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a Twitter thing. You see it on Twitter a lot. Um, but yeah, I just think for him, it's just like, man, if he's at peace, and even if he just decided he wants to come back to WWE to wrestle, that's his prerogative. And I mean, there are gonna be people that are mad with him no matter what he does. I mean, he could he could just decide one day that he's never gonna wrestle again. People will be mad at that. If he goes back to WWE, there'll be people that call him a sellout. If he goes to AEW, then there'll be people that have something to say about that. Oh, they signed another ex WWE guy. It doesn't matter what he does at this point. People are going to be angry about it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no matter what he does, you're right. There's going to be a target on him. First of all, because it's him. Second, because people are the way they are. They just want to find fault. They love to see people fall. You know what I mean? Like, people love to see the great ones fall. They can't wait. A lot of them just can't wait. They're counting the days till a scandal comes out about Roman so they can say, "Oh, I told you. Oh, I knew it." They're praising him now. The minute Roman turns full babyface again, they'll hate him again. And you just can't trust it, man. I mean, I don't know whatever happened to, look, you like who you like and I like who I like, and let's just leave it at that. But we can't do that anymore. And that's the price you pay for social media. A couple things he mentioned in the podcast that have really stayed with me. A lot of it stays with me because, like I said, I listen to it all the time, at least once a month. The Ryback stuff. I don't know how many fans Ryback made. I'll tell you this: he was getting when he really, after the squashes were happening for a while, that night that he came out and saved JR when Punk was in the ring with Heyman. Dude, go back and watch that if you haven't seen it in a while. That place went nuts. Now, first off, that's credit to Punk for being such a great heel. But two, Ryback, I don't know if he had it, but he had something. He had something people wanted to see. It took a while to get him there. But man, Punk was not kind and flat out said this guy hurt him on purpose, which, of course, Ryback, denied. Obviously, he did. But, I mean, do you think that hurt Ryback in the long run? You think people are still thinking about that?
Well, somewhat, but I think Ryback's kind of a polarizing guy anyway.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. Some of
At
the
least
stuff
what
he's
I've
talking
seen of
about.
him on the internet, I've seen him do is, I don't know.
Some of his viewpoints and stuff's kind of out there too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I find it funny. He's never been back. He hasn't been back in that company, which is, I mean, everybody comes back eventually, I would think, but man, he hasn't, which is, yeah.
He's kind of a one-dimensional guy. There's
That's
not
true.
much you can do with Ryback outside of being, he's just he's just kind of a big guy. And I mean, he wasn't that great of a talker. He wasn't that great of a character. So there's not much you can do with him. And I don't want that to make it seem like I'm bashing him. I'm not a big, oh, if somebody doesn't do it for me, then they have no place at the company. I think he could work, but I'm not sure what they could do with him at this point.
That's fair. That's fair. He can do what he can do what he does. And he's pretty good at what he does. Yeah, that's a valid point. Yeah, I mean, there's places for guys like him. And, you want a well-rounded presentation. If every single match were Punk versus Bryan, every single match, it would be like, it's like New Japan.
Yeah.
It's like New Japan. You got to have Yano. I love Yano. Yano's beating some incredibly huge names right now, which is shocking to me. We get into that later. I mean, shocking. I sat there with my mouth open when he beat Tanahashi. I'm like, what? I mean, blew my mind, right? But I mean, you gotta have some levity. You gotta have some. Okay, this is lighthearted. This guy does this. This guy does that. She does this. She does that. I mean, it's a well-rounded presentation, so I get that. But honestly, in my opinion, I think there's more to it there than maybe we know between Ryback and that company. I think there's some stuff that went on or that was said. Maybe he rubbed them the wrong way. And, we were talking about Roman earlier. The idea that the Shield was almost, Rollins, Ambrose, and Ono. I mean, that's mind-blowing in and of itself, man. I mean, Chris Hero can work. Chris put on a ton of weight over the years, man, a ton of weight. But he can still go. I mean, that would have been, I don't want to say better than what we got. I don't know if it's been better. I don't think it would have been bad at all. And I think with Hero being the worker that he is, man, that thing could have caught fire quick.
Yeah, I think it could have caught fire. I mean, I don't know if I believe that it would have done as good as it did without Roman, because Roman's a once-in-a-lifetime star. So, I mean, I just think the idea of having 3 guys that are as big as those guys in one stable is why the Shield is such a memorable stable. And I don't think you would have gotten that with Hero. But I think the thing that's always striking to me about it, because, I kind of got into this debate online with people, because the stuff with Roman and Punk became, public consciousness again, because Roman mentioned Punk in an interview.
Right.
The thing that's striking to me about it, I don't ever feel like it was a situation where Punk was like, oh, well, I don't like this Roman guy. Who's this Roman guy? Why are you guys trying to stick me with this guy just because he's your guy? I never felt like that's what it was. I always felt like it was like, no, I know Hero. He's my guy. I've worked closely with him. He's my friend. I want him in the stable. He could use something like this. And they decided, nope, we're going to use your idea, and we're going to use that as a vehicle to get our guy over. And I can see how that made Punk mad. Like, I mean, this is my idea, and you guys are taking it, and you're doing what you always do. You're taking it and using it for a guy with your aesthetic. And that isn't to say that Roman is bad, but he's their guy, and it's clear that he's their guy.
Absolutely. And if he's going to be mad at anybody, if he's going to point the finger at anybody about his first run when he was literally winning every single match every single night, if he wants to blame somebody, he needs to blame the company. I mean, when the company, when the crowd wants Daniel Bryan more than they want oxygen that night, you give him Daniel Bryan. I'm sorry. And when they didn't, again, whole other podcast, Roman is. But, there's a lot of fault to be thrown around. And it all goes back to the company, not to Roman, not to Punk, but to the company. Because, when Vince gets it in his head, one track mind, baby. And when he does it, he goes hard, go home, right? I mean, that's what he did with Roman. He's still doing it. I mean, what's working now is that it's relaxed. There's no live crowds anymore, at least not right now. And there's more of a willingness to experiment and see what we can do, what we can get away with. And it's working because there's no pressure. And now the pressure is just go out there and get over. And he's doing it. And it's working great. This is what he should have been doing from day one. He could have been a great, phenomenal babyface. Oh my God. Yes, he could have. But he never was because of the booking, because of the weird situations they put him in. And Punk was red hot, smoking hot. And man, it just, they threw water on him every chance they got. And, people talk about the podcast, man, and it's like, well, it's sour grapes, this, that, and the other. Again, I disagree with that. He wanted to clear the air. And dude, anytime well, all right, is this guy lying? I always ask myself one question. What does he or she gain by lying? And if I can come up with an answer, I may not believe that person. If I can say, wait a minute, I think I know why they'd be making this up. I just don't, for the life of me, to this day, even after the lawsuit, which WWE lost, and they should have, because it was nonsense. It was frivolous. That was just to make Punk broke, which they did. By all rights, they did at the time. But when I listen to that podcast, even now, even yesterday, I'm thinking, what reason did this guy have? Other than, well, I got to save face and I don't want people to be on my side. He didn't care about that. He never cared about what you thought about him. Anybody. He didn't care about any of that stuff. He could have just kept his mouth shut and just stayed away. I think he had the truth and he had the story and he wanted to just tell it. I mean, I don't know. It's crazy to me. I just don't understand. Well, he's lying. I'm like, and dude, here's something I say on the other podcast all the time. If you trust the $1 billion pro wrestling company over the talent, you've already lost the game. You've already lost. Yeah. Because that talent doesn't have 30 lawyers at their disposal and $1 billion in the bank. That talent has himself, some money, and a lawyer. I mean, it's different. He doesn't have corporate interest to look out for. He's looking out for his livelihood. And you're going to side with a $1 billion company? I don't get it. I don't get it. Am I crazy that people would side with WWE over Punk? Why is that?
Well, I think it's by design. I think WWE they've made a point of trying to kick the feet from under guys so that they don't become what The Rock became or what Hogan became, because they don't want people to believe in individuals. They want people to believe in the entity. And I think a lot of fans are WWE fans before they are, fans of any individuals. You can make a lot of cases as to why I feel like they would be against what Punk is saying, because you also have you have the business of wrestling trying to keep their narrative going, and it's in their interest to fight back against what Punk is saying. But the thing that's in Punk's favor is it's not like Punk is the only one that came out and said certain things that he said. Everybody that leaves has similar stories. I mean, I was just listening to Jazz, who's retiring, and she was saying how she never had an action figure. And I was like, boy, sure sounds similar to what Punk said. Sure sounds similar to what other people have said about how they didn't market some of their guys that were champions at the time and were on WrestleMania stages.
It's a valid point. And I'm sitting here as you were saying that, I was going through my head trying to remember, was there anybody that did this before him? I mean, there'd been frivolous lawsuits over the years and people talking smack and doing, shoot interviews on YouTube and getting paid to do them. But was there ever anybody to this degree that was on his level who wasn't getting a payday from it, coming out and telling the story?
Well, didn't Brett come out and do the thing on TV after the screw job?
That's true. But it's one event, right? It's one event. It's one major betrayal. It's one, they made the bad call. I mean, yeah, he had axe to grind with Shawn, but I mean, that was a poor decision on everybody's part that night. It really was. But I mean, Punk's story was, God, how many years in the making? Where it was a consistent, this started years ago. No one's listening. They don't care. I think his story spoke mostly to, this is how this company runs its talent, and it's just getting worse, and no one's listening. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you also, that's why I said you have wrestling fighting against Punk, because it's like, well, no, you're not supposed to say that. Those things belong behind the curtains. You can't expose the business. And so that's why I think a lot of people, if they had those kind of grievances before, they wouldn't come out and say it, because no, you can't expose the business. You can't tell all the secrets. And I mean, there were people that did do shoot interviews that did put that stuff out there. I mean, but there are a lot of people that don't come forward with those things because they believe, like, nope, this is part of the business. We have to protect wrestling first.
And for anybody that feels that way, they're clowns. I'm sorry. I don't agree with that. Because if they side with that company, first of all, you're crazy. But second, who exposed the business first? The guy that runs the freaking company. I mean, he went on national television and told the world, none of this stuff's real. This is just a play. We're actors. This is sports entertainment. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, say no more. That's what he said. I mean, he did it first. So for anybody that would side with him over anybody, they've lost their minds. I mean, I guess I kind of understand, but no. I mean, when Punk no longer works for them and they're no longer paying his paychecks, that goes for anybody. Tell your story. Because when you are on the payroll, I get it. I mean, you got to keep quiet. You don't want to, I perfectly understand that. But man, when you're done with them, and look, he didn't care about going back because he didn't want to go back. So, I don't know. I have a different view on this, on the whole podcast thing than some people do. Because you're right, man. A lot of people vilify him for what he said. And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, you could almost hear a difference in the end of that show versus when they started. It just sounds like he took he said a lot, he let out a deep breath, and then he was okay. And it felt like he was in a better mood almost. Like, man, I'm glad I got all that off my chest, which he was. But You know, the lawsuit
Yeah.
WWE brought against him, the doctor brought against him, laughable. I mean, I don't have the transcript in front of me, but basically the judge pretty much said something. If I don't know what he said exactly, but it was something to the effect of, you know, this is why are we doing this? This seems, you know what I mean? Like it was obvious. You know what I mean? Like you got to. I mean, I guess they felt like, well, we got to look into this, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know. If I was the doctor, I don't know how I would feel. But at the same time, it sounds like he dropped the ball for a long time. Now, whether or not he was acting of his own volition or if he was being told by people around him, listen, Punk complains, don't worry about it. Just give him a Band-Aid, give him a freaking antibiotic, he'll shut up. I mean, dude, I don't know. I wasn't there. So I'm just, let's don't get us sued or anything. So.
well, the very idea of it is ludicrous in itself because he never named a doctor by name. Right?
That's true. That's true.
He just said the WWE doctor. So for this one doctor to take it so personally and go, nope, I have to sue him because, you know, this is liable. Well, no, you're protected by $1 million company. You're you're insulated here. You're going to have a job. What he said on that podcast wasn't going to get you fired from your job because you were following orders. It's not like you were doing anything that was out of the norm. It's not like, again, that he mentioned you by name. So he put it out there. So all these people were sending you emails like, oh, you ruined Punk's career. He never did that. So no, this is an unwinnable case for you. You can't. It's an unwinnable case. You're just trying to drag him and you're just trying to drag Colt. And it worked because you ruined their friendship in the midst of it.
Yeah, they still, I mean, by all reports, they still are not back on the same page, which, you know, that's what we know from 1,000 miles away and not being with the guys in their own homes. So we don't know what's been said between them. And I mean, I like Colt and I like Punk a lot. I mean, I would hope that they one day, you know, mend fences, but I don't know. I try to put myself in one of their shoes and try to, how would I feel if my best friend said something and the other thing happened? And, you know, I don't know, man. I mean, there might be too much to repair, but.
Yeah. I mean, when you put money in the midst of these situations, it's tough to come back from that because, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what was said. I mean, if you make it seem like you got to be taken care of and then you get in this case and we're both losing all this money because of this case, you know, I'm trying to salvage my own personal life and you're looking out for self too. It's tough. It's tough for me to just be like, well, Punk was wrong because he should have had his back. It's like, well, I don't know the whole situation and I don't understand just how much went into this fighting this lawsuit on both of their parts.
It was a mess, and it stayed in the news for a while. It stayed in the headlines. All the websites reported on it. I did too, and it was the story of the day. And when they won the lawsuit, everything was done. I was happy for both of them because I mean, their attorneys both said this is hogwash. No, this is going to fly. Don't worry about a thing, and they were right. I mean, of course, they both got a lot of money out of it. I mean, it is what it is. But it just goes to show you, man, it's freedom of of all things to quote Two Live Crew, freedom of speech, just watch what you say. I mean, it's true. I mean, go ahead and do what you want to do, but you better be careful. I don't know. Maybe that's the lesson here or not. Dude, we've spent the whole show talking about the controversy and stuff, but you know, I don't want to take this thing home until we hit on some good points. What's your favorite CM Punk match? Do you have one?
It's probably the match with Bryan for the championship.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I can't remember the pay-per-view. It's one of those pay-per-view that doesn't even exist anymore. Is it Over the Limit?
I think that sounds right.
Yeah, so yeah, Punk versus Bryan and Over the Limit.
You think I would have done my homework on that?
I'm pretty sure it's Over the Limit.
I mean, all right, so Punk versus Undertaker at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, for anybody to suggest that CM Punk could not hang with the Undertaker, and yes, kids, Vince suggested that. I mean, that blows my mind. And it ticked him off, and it should. But man, what a match. And after the match, supposedly Taker was, I mean, of course, he'd already worked him before as world champion. And during those matches, Taker had nothing but great things to say about him. So I'm sure Taker was happy with the match. But man, Punk was such a heel. Remember the urn?
Yes.
And Paul Bearer had not been dead that long. And he dumped ashes out. And the implication was that it was these grown men on Twitter, okay? The implication was that, well, was that supposed to be Paul Bearer's ashes in the urn? Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's what it was. Like, well, that's what they were saying. That's what they meant by that. Oh my God. It's a pro wrestling angle. Calm down. It's not real. It's just, it's meant to wind you up. See how mad you are? It wound you up. It worked. I mean, yeah. I mean, that may have been as heel as he had been since the Straight Edge Society. And we definitely can't finish this without talking about the Straight Edge Society, man. What good stuff. What great stuff. Tell me you've gone back and watched some of that stuff he was doing then.
I mean, all of his promos from that time. I mean, of course, the Rumble when he would just get on a mic and just trash everybody after he eliminated people. He's just standing in the ring alone with the mic. Just great stuff. But that's why I also have such a connection with Fire Burns, because all of the SES stuff, he still was using that thing then. So it's weird. Like I remember I posed this question on Twitter: what is your favorite CM Punk theme? And a lot of people said Cult of Personality, but surprisingly, a lot of people picked Fire Burns.
I mean, you're making me like this song, and. And my favorite's still Cult of Personality because it's exactly who he is. But, you know, I mean, I get the merits of it. I understand. But, man, you're right. You're right about what you said. I mean, it's very closely identified with him. And the SES stuff is just, again, I'm trying to think about, do I remember something being done like that before he did it? I mean, look, as we said before, it's hard to find something original. Basically, you just do something and you take an inspiration from something else. So no, you know, a wrestler, you know, doing a Jesus character is not new. It's been done before, and it may not have been done to that degree. So no, nothing's brand new. It all depends on how good you are at your job and how well you do with the gimmick that you've chosen. And man, he crushed it. I mean, he's easy to hate. Because the same thing that makes him a great face is also the same thing that makes him a great heel. And that's, he could be anybody. He doesn't look like a megastar. He doesn't look like a superhero. He doesn't act like a superhero. He just looks like a normal guy. So what makes him work as a face also makes him work as a heel, because you look at him and you go, you know what? I don't think I can trust that guy. He looks like he's up to something. Because he just looks shady when he's a heel, you know? And it's great and it works. And I mean, I would dare say Doc Gallows has a lot of positive things to say about Punk at this point, because without Punk's idea of that god-awful Festus character, that was some of the worst garbage I've ever seen in my life in that company. And there's a lot of garbage coming out of that company. But man, the Doc Gallows character was great, and it fit, and Serena was great. Joey Mercury was awesome, and it just worked. And him doing the Christ character was just... Man, it just goes to show you how talented this guy is. He could do anything and make it work, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's gone on a statement and said the SES stuff was some of the most fun he had there, and I could believe it, because he was just so into it. It was so much a part of who he was. I mean, even the stuff with Jeff, you could make the argument that it might have gone a little too far, but
right.
It was all really good stuff. It's probably one of my favorite programs that Jeff has done with the company.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned Jeff, man, because that we can't go any farther without talking about that. He and Jeff Hardy had a lot of chemistry, and they had some really good matches, and Punk was great. And you know, before CM Punk. And dude, I've never taken a drink in my entire life. I've never smoked anything. I've never tried any type of drugs. And I didn't know there was even a term for that. I didn't know there was such a thing. And
yeah.
before Punk, I didn't know straight edge was actually a thing. So when he came along, I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, okay, I'm straight edge. Sweet. There's a term for it. I didn't know. But man, the way he takes that and twists it, and he had done it on the indie circuit already for years. He'd done it in Ring of Honor, where he uses that as a heel. And I'm like, that's brilliant. That's so good. It's like you're judging people. You're looking down from on high, and you're holding yourself so much above everyone else. Like, I don't need your addictions. I don't need that pain in my life. And I'm so much better than you are because I don't have vices. Which makes the stuff that he did with Jericho so weird. You know, where it's like they were trying to say he's drinking. And you're like, did Punk say okay to this? Was he okay with that? Like, I've never heard him talk about whether or not he thought that storyline was crap or if he was okay with it. I'd love to know what he thinks about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think they had some great matches, but some of the storylines in between were kind of weird. Just like the stuff with his dad got brought up. Like, that just didn't feel necessary to the story.
Same here. Yeah, I thought the same thing. In fact, when you said that, the promo just jumped into my head, and the reaction that he had and the reaction I had when I'm like, wow, why are they doing that? Like, yeah, I didn't get that. I mean, Punk, anyone that knows Punk knows the story of his family. It was not a good childhood. He ended up living with friends most of his life after, I guess, when he became a teenager. And that's his family. And that's what he considers family. And it's just a very different situation. And, you know, yeah, but you know what, man? That's what pro wrestling companies do, especially WWE. They take real life and they put it on TV, for better or worse, and usually it's worse. And they put it under a microscope and they try to make $1 with it. And I don't know. Going back to the pallbearer stuff with the urn. On one hand, the company claims that they had contacted Paul's family and they were okay with it. On the other hand, they claimed that they were not contacted. So I don't know who you're supposed to believe on that. But
you never know.
I mean, it's an urn full of something that was not someone's ashes, and it's Showtime, and it's TV. And if this were a movie, you would never think that there's a person in there. And I mean, I get but the whole thing was to get Punk over as a heel, and it worked. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I'm not saying I disagree with it either. But man, when he did that night, he dumped him on Taker and then wiped him on his chest. I thought, man, Punk will do anything it takes. And I'm sorry, I respect that. I mean, you can call it cheap heat if you want to, but he was determined to prove a point in that match at Mania, and I still love that match, dude. I think it holds up even now.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed that match. I don't know if it's as acclaimed, but I also enjoy the match with Brock. I think that was SummerSlam, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that match, and I think that's one of the better Brock matches in recent memory.
Well, it sure didn't end in 30 seconds. That's for sure. You know, I mean, there again, Punk should have won. Punk should have beat Hunter. He should have beat Brock. He should have beat Rock. I'm sorry. He shouldn't have lost the belt to Rock. I just don't.
No, he shouldn't have lost to Rock, and I'm a huge Rock fan. But he shouldn't have lost that match. I just still don't understand. I mean, I get for them, you know, Punk versus Rock is the money match at WrestleMania, but it just feels like that match didn't need a title, man. It just didn't. I mean, you had already done the match without a title anyway. You could have easily done a rematch without the title.
Right. Of course. And, you know, how many guys have ever stood across the ring from The Rock and they both had mics in their hands and the other guy has been able to go toe-to-toe? Only a couple people can say that. Austin's done it. Foley, maybe. Hunter, maybe. But, dude, Punk did it. Punk's like, without saying it, Punk had that look like, you're not scaring me, pal. You know, I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can do. I know how to get over. You're not going to scare me. I loved it. I mean, I thought it was great. And when he looked up at him and he said fighting him was like trying to box with God. Like, it was a line that was so far above everyone's head. but at the same time, it was perfect because it was fitting completely into what he was doing, and it was, yeah. I mean, I guess Cena. I guess you could say Cena in that feud he had with Rock.
Yeah.
They were going back and forth. Dude, I don't think Punk versus Cena gets enough credit. I love their matches, honestly. I think they had great chemistry together.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the better feuds of Cena's career. And I mean, he's had some notable feuds, but I think it's definitely one of my favorites. And I mean, that could be my bias because I'm a Punk guy, but I really enjoyed their feud. I actually I think he's possibly Punk's best opponent at WWE. I mean, other than maybe Jeff. But no, I think it has to be Cena. Maybe Brian's up there too.
Yeah, I think so. I think you had to put Brian up there. They didn't work each other that much, but yeah, I think you had to put him up there. That's a great question, man. I don't know who else in the world you could put up there. Del Rio had good matches with him, but I don't know if anything to write home about. Yeah, I'll go for that. And it's no coincidence, folks, that the best matches of John's career have come against top talents. Again, not slapping anybody in the face here. I like John. It's just that John tends to do his best work when he's with a top guy. And Punk's a top guy. Punk could carry anybody. Not that he carried him. Don't get me wrong. But, when you have two guys who are committed to being the best in the ring, you're probably going to have a pretty darn good match, which is what they did. And a lot of quotes from Punk over the years, one of them, especially with John, being, you have become the very thing you hate. You are the New York Yankees. Dude, I'll never forget that. I don't have to look that up to remember it. I'll never forget it because I'm like, the minute he said it, you're like, holy God, he is the New York Yankee. That's perfect. Such good stuff, man.
Yeah. Yeah. All that stuff. I mean, for me, when I think about wrestling, like when you think of the Attitude Era, you think Rock, Austin. But I think like for his era, like Punk was the biggest star there. Like, and I don't think that's really debatable. I mean, yeah, I mean, Ruthless Aggression era, it was definitely Cena's time, but I could be biased because I didn't watch much of the Ruthless Aggression era. I wasn't a big fan of a lot of what was going on then. But yeah, there's so many people that I know that started watching again because of Punk.
Yeah, that's valid. That's a valid point. And I think maybe we could finish with this. You and I have talked about this before, but Punk at the time, and I think he was the first, but I don't have the proof to back that up. But supposedly he was the first guy to outsell John in merch sales. He outperformed John Cena. And strike while the iron's hot. He was red hot. He was white hot. And everything was going his way. And people loved him, and they couldn't wait to see him. They were paying to see him. They wanted to see him in the main event. They were pissed off when he wasn't in the main event. Why is this guy not in the main event? And people were all for it. And then, he still was number 2. I mean, had they turned Cena heel, the old mantra of, well, if you turn the top guy heel, he'll get over. I don't think John would have been over. I don't think he would have got cheered at all. I think Punk would have been the obvious babyface in that feud. And I think it would have been some great business done by both guys. And it's a what-if scenario, but man, I go back and think about that time. How many more months or years could they have gotten out of that? Would things not have gone south the way they did for him? Would he have been happier? Would things have gone better? Would he still be there? It's a bunch of what-ifs, man, but that would have been something to see.
Yeah. To me, I was, I was rooting for Punk. So to me, Punk wasn't the bad guy in that feud. I never saw him as the heel in that feud.
I don't think he was. I really don't think he was because, again, man, a lot of the stuff he was saying was true to life. A lot of the criticisms he did of John in those promos were stuff that people were already saying. It was pipe bomb material. Calling him the New York Yankees, saying that he was a sellout, saying that he was the face of the company. And then, John, because John always has to be John Wayne, He always has to be Captain America. He kept having a problem with Vince. Vince wanted to come out and screw him over that night in Chicago and screw over Punk. And John jumps out of the ring and races up the aisle. He's like, "You're not doing it. You're not stopping this match. You're not. No, we're going to finish this. He deserves the chance, and I'm giving it to him." And I'm like, God, man, you really want us to like John Cena? Like, you're killing me with this. It's the same thing they did with Roman. It's the same deal that they did with Roman, where they just, "Listen, pal, we want you to really love this guy. He's the greatest." And you're at home going, "Nah, he's not. He's wrestling the greatest. But nah, he's not the greatest." I mean, I don't know. Again, out of touch old man? I don't know. I don't work there, but it sure seems like it. Sure seems to be the case.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of blows my mind at this point how long it took them to turn Roman. I just feel like there were so many chances to do it. I mean, definitely after the match with Taker at Mania, it felt like the perfect chance to turn him. The boos he got at that Raw afterwards was just out of this world. And I mean, I thought the way that they handled it was perfect. He came out there, didn't say much, let them just shower him in boos. And I felt like that was it. You just turn him now. And they just still wouldn't do it. So, I mean, and the stuff they're doing with him now is fantastic. I think what they're doing with him now is perfect.
Man, you're going back to that time. At the time when and by the way, you're right. It is perfect now. It's great. But at the time when they were booing him out of the building, and every time he tried to talk, they wouldn't listen. They just kept booing. It kept getting worse and worse and worse. And to his credit, he knew when to stop. He wasn't trying to talk. But, dude, just imagine if he could have turned his back to the camera so the camera couldn't, read his lips and they would bleep it out. What if he just said F you and flipped them off? Can you imagine? My God, nuclear heat. I mean, obviously, they're not going to allow the F word on TV. But, man, what else could you have said in that moment if you had managed to get a word out? I mean, God bless, that would have been... I mean, we can't have the kiddies seeing that kind of stuff. Yeah, but it would have been true to his character. He'd been like, "You know what? I'm done. I've tried to make you people happy. You don't care about me. You don't care about my family. You don't care anything about me. So from now on, I'm in the business for myself." That would have been great. But yeah. I mean, it all worked out for him. I guess you could say it all worked out for Punk. Like we said before, man, he's happy. I mean, he seems like he doesn't need the business. I mean, yeah, I'd love to see him back in some capacity, but I'm okay if he doesn't come back. I'm perfectly happy with that myself. Dude, I feel like we could talk a whole lot more about Punk because I know you and I are both, we both appreciate his work. We're both fans of his. I'm not going to lie about it. I am. But if there's a way to give your last word on CM Punk, or at least some final thoughts on the guy, what do you got for me?
I don't know. I guess CM Punk is just, to me, he's a once-in-a-lifetime star. I think he's one of the biggest mega stars of his generation. And, I mean, whether he wrestles or not, again, I think he's already, created a legacy for himself that's just going to stand the test of time.
I agree with that. And I'm going to go back to your point. I'm going to sort of spin off of that. CM Punk changed the business. There's no doubt about it. He changed the face of that company. He changed the way, not only did he change the business, he changed the way fans think about the business, in my opinion. He changed what a superstar could be. He changed what a main event guy could be. And, the guys in Ring of Honor for years called themselves that sounds disrespectful. They called themselves main event talents. I mean, their fans did, and they popped for them, and that's great. But I'm talking about on a worldwide stage. No, Punk wasn't the first one to do the things he did, to your point. But he got it over on the worldwide stage of WWE and made that segment of fans change their minds and their viewpoints on what a main event guy could be. If not for CM Punk, there is no Daniel Bryan as world champion. And if not for Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, if not for Punk and period, there's a plethora of other guys. Maybe AJ would never have come, or they wouldn't have cared about him to begin with. Maybe this, maybe that. He's changed the business, and he left his mark. He'll never be forgotten in my estimation. I don't think anybody will ever forget him because of the mark he left on this business. And at the end of the day, you want to leave the business better than it was when you got there, which is the goal of every top pro wrestler in the sport. And in my opinion, it's mission accomplished. And that is CM Punk. Hey, thanks for listening to the show. Check out our social media on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at 6M Podcast. We'll see you next time.